And the number 3 question from Mr. Matthew Murr is, what would you personally define as the best balance between Walt's way of doing things and Eisner and Iger in terms of running the parks, i.e., pricing of the parks, the range of attractions and amenities at the Disney resorts, thinking up original themes and stories, or relying on existing ones? This is like a massively loaded question, but go ahead, Vash. What are your overall thoughts on like what he's asking here is what's the best balance between the price points, IP attractions compared to original attractions? How do you balance the financials and all of this together? You're making quality stuff, but you got to make money too. How are all these factors? How do you balance that in just the right way?
Oh boy, this is a really interesting one. Oh man, I'm fond of Walt's methodology, where it was just like, okay, like, all right, I understand we don't completely own Disneyland. Like, we have a lot of debt that we have to actually pay back, and we don't own, like, I don't even think they had a majority interest at some points when it came to Disneyland. But we're still going to invest all that we can in it, right? We're just gonna take all the cash that we're making, just invest it right back in, and freaks out Roy because it's like, we have to turn like a revenue, like we have to turn a profit, we have to like buy this thing back, and it's like nonsense. We had to invest in the parks, right? I like that. It's risky though, like super risky. I think the early Eisner era was pretty good in terms of balance, right? You had some original attractions, but you also had, some pretty good IP ones that got people in the door, right? There was a constant slate of investment, and while it was expensive, it generally was kind of grafted out really well, right? I mean, the later Eisner years got a little lean, right? It got a little cheap.
Yep.
Iger, you got some great ones, but we had to wait for them, right? I think the early Eisner era, you had some mix of some original attractions, IP attractions on a nice regular recurrent schedule. Maybe the pricing was a little aggressive in the later Eisner years. But I think those early Eisner years, I think that was the best mix of kind of all of us. What do you think about that?
100%. I'm completely on the same page with you with that. I think that in terms of the parks, the first decade for Michael Eisner's era was near flawless. He managed to really, him and Frank Wells managed to invest enough where you were getting really quality stuff and stuff that was really kind of innovative at the time. Like to have an outside IP like Indiana Jones in a Disney park.
Very controversial.
Mm-hmm. Very controversial back then. And Star Tours, again, outside IP at the time, very controversial. And even Captain EO, bringing in Michael Jackson and doing that whole thing. All this stuff was kind of outside the box at the time,
Absolutely was.
Yeah, and they spent a huge amount of money. I think, what was it? Francis Ford Coppola did Captain EO, and there was like no expense.
It was the most expensive film per minute ever at the time that it came out. I mean, it was extremely expensive. Yeah, it took some big risks. They
took some big risks, and then upon making those risks, they made their money back in spades. And it was really just everyone was kind of happy, right? The fans were happy. Hey, we're getting some kick-ass stuff. We got Indiana Jones, Star Tours, Captain EO. We're doing great.
Splash Mountain.
The bean counters were happy. We're making money hand over fist. So it was that perfect balance. Everyone's happy. We're all good,
Yeah.
I agree with you. And even in animation, it was kind of the same thing. It was kind of like that perfect balance in the early Eisner years of like, okay, we're going to respect the history. We're going to do animated films in the same vein that Walt did them in. Where like a Beauty and the Beast can sit next to a Cinderella and it feels cohesive. Like these they're cut from the same cloth, right?
It does.
But yet Beauty and the Beast is still fresh enough for modern audiences. It was like that perfect mix, right?
Right.
And they just struck the right tone, like over and over again, whether it be films, whether it be attractions. And then, you know, unfortunately, like we talked about earlier, Frank Wells passed away. Then that all everything changed dramatically. But yeah, that first decade of Eisner, that's like a master class on how to run Disney and run it like just balancing it so perfectly, you know?
Right. You know, and honestly, like, you know, Eisner and Frank Wells, they were both very ambitious, right? They really wanted to kind of supercharge the entire company by, you know, just a slate of different product. The live action stuff, you know, the Bette Midler stuff, you know, I could live without. But everything else, like the animation, the theme parks. I mean, even Tony Baxter talks about this. He's just like, man, you know, when Eisner and Frank Wells were together, man. I mean, you know, it just, you can go to him and ask him for anything, and they're like, "Yeah, let's do it," you know. And he talks about how great of a process that actually was back at that time period. It really speaks to how profound Frank Wells' passing was, you know, and what effect that had on not just the trajectory of the company, but with certain individuals, certain decision makers, you know, and how they felt about certain things going forward. I mean, the Disney decade, you know, oh man, you just think about what that could have been, you know, and it was just cut short, and it was really unfortunate. It's interesting. So Matthew, he said something back in our live stream, and I wasn't able to get to it, but he was suggesting that the Paris issues happened in Frank Wells, you know, when Frank Wells was alive, and he was calling into question maybe Frank Wells, you know, maybe, you know, I mean, something bad happened on his watch, and maybe, you know, maybe he wasn't perfect, and that's true, but you have to understand about Frank Wells, you know. He was the one that actually negotiated with the bankers to keep Disneyland Paris open and actually get it on a financial trajectory to make a profit at some point, you know, keep it in kind of the black rather than the deep red to try and you know, finance their way out of it. He was the one that negotiated that deal, and really he kept that dream alive in terms of Disneyland Paris. So yes, these bad things did happen while he was alive, but he was so influential.
Oh yeah.
In keeping that park alive. I mean, he really was, and it was out of that hard negotiation period with the banks in France that he was like, you know what, you know, that was tough. I'm gonna go away on a weekend trip, and you know, I'm gonna go skiing in the mountains there. I'll be right back, and that's what happened there. You know, that's where he takes a helicopter ride, and the rest is history. But you know, Frank Wells, I mean, he dedicated himself to the company to the very end. Yep. So don't go disparaging him.
No.
He was good stuff.
No, he was great stuff, and he's got his name on the Frank G. Wells building over the studio.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wells Expedition Matterhorn.
Yep.